The world of $1,000 a month car payment is nothing new anymore. The last 3 years we saw prices escalating to the point where you could spend $100,000 on a pickup truck, 50 grand on a small SUV, and even minivans are known to go as much as 60 or 70 grand, so it wasn't very hard to overextend and overspend on your budget. But unfortunately, people were also recipients of overpaying for that price of that vehicle with extras, market adjustment fees, and often that meant that people were in a negative equity situation almost right outside the gate. And can you actually believe 15% of the population buying cars today have exceeded that $1,000 a month car payment, literally set up for failure? So today we're going to give you 3 modern average day salary ranges, what you should actually expect to be paying per month, some great rules of thumb, and also we're going to share whether you should really finance, buy, lease, pay cash, or any of the above. Now, part of the problem is banks, lending institutions, and as well the dealers themselves have been handing out money left, right, and center. And even if you believe that you couldn't afford that vehicle outright, all the dealers do is extend that loan term now that people are paying for 7 or 8 or 9 years for a loan just to ensure you make your monthly payment. All that does is ensure that you're locked in for the long haul, paying an exorbitant amount of cash for your new or used vehicle. And by the time you pay that down after 8 years, it's virtually worthless. Merely 5 or 6 short years ago, the average loan term was 36, 48 months, at the most 60 months would be a 5-year term. However, now things have changed just to accommodate that monthly budget. And now the average customer is actually paying for their car payments over $1,000 a month and doing so for at least 69 months. And while some of the prime buyers are getting their loan terms averaging out to about 64 months, the worst reality is people that are in the subprime territory where they don't have the cash flow, they don't have as much deposit, and they're stuck paying much longer term period for their car. And those folks are averaging almost 73 months to get their vehicle paid off. And the worst part is, while those prime buyers can get interest rates as low as 3, 4, even say 4.75%, the worst part is subprime buyers with a bad history or first-time buyers are actually going to pay as much as 13.42% if they don't have a bad record. And clearly, to make those high interest charges on a modern day vehicle that's priced at $70,000 or $80,000 usually means those folks are locked in for the long term. And sadly, accumulating negative equity. So let's talk about 3 of the major salary ranges. Those that make $40,000 a year, they will talk $80,000 a year, which is roughly the median, and something that's on the higher end of the scale, $150,000 a year medium. And what we'll talk about is how much you should be spending on a monthly basis. If in fact you're a garden variety car buyer and you don't necessarily care about your vehicles, you just like to get in, drive the kids to school, drive yourself to work, and you're not really an enthusiast, I would consider not exceeding 20 to 25% of your salary range. So at 25%, I wouldn't exceed on the $40,000 salary, I wouldn't go over a $10,000 car. On the $80,000, I wouldn't go over a $20,000 vehicle. And at a $150,000 salary, I probably wouldn't go over a $35,000 vehicle. But on the more extreme side of the equation, when you're talking about people that are more enthusiastic about their cars, people that like to spit shine their car on a weekend and polish it up real nice, and they get to enjoy it for what it is, the driving excellence. You like to pull gears and you like that shiny new performance car or some other enthusiast vehicle, those folks really shouldn't consider going more than 35%. Or in the case of somebody who's earning 40 grand a year, don't go over $14,000 for that vehicle. For an $80,000 salary, don't exceed $28,000. And for somebody earning $150K a year, definitely don't exceed a $52,500 vehicle. But the sad reality is, we all know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that goes way beyond that. How many people we know that have just spent $90,000 on that new Denali pickup truck, or $120,000 on that new diesel, or $75,000 on that new Jeep? Yes, we all know people like that, and that's where people get stuck. And next we'll focus on the monthly payments of your new or used car. All things considered, if you can really afford it, I would always strongly suggest always go to the cash price. Look at the price of a vehicle. If it's $50,000, look at that, focus on that, and make that work within your space. Remember, and we'll give you some more of those rules of thumb coming up. However, very few people that you or I know likely have enough money to buy their car flat out cash, so we will focus a little bit more on the monthly payment aspects. So let's get into monthly budget. Have you ever heard of the 24-10 rule? I live by that. And sadly enough, North Americans, Canadians, and Americans want instant gratification. They want that fancy, shiny car. But they also don't have the time that they want to wait around. They don't have that delayed gratification. Everybody wants it now. So nobody wants to put the money down, save up a little bit of cash in the bank, and come to the table prepared with a significant down payment. And unfortunately, because of that, often people get into a car, they pay full price for it with $0 down, that by the time they try to flip that car in a year or 2 years, maybe they're bored of it, they're still underwater. Yes, negative equity, because they put nothing down. The depreciation usually drops 10 to 15% per year, especially if you're talking European imports. And then you find yourself snookered. Your $50,000 car is now only worth $35,000 after a year, but sadly, that $50,000 car, you still owe $47,000 because of the interest charges tacked on there and the fact that you did not maximize your down payment. So the 24-10 rule means that at the bare minimum, you should be looking at 20% down payment on your car. What that does is, number one, it gets you a little bit more dialed in, gets you a little more focused, and show that you're fiscally responsible. It gets you thinking about it, and if you're having to spend that time to save up that 20%, and it might even take you a year or 2 years to come up with that down payment, it gives you that thought of, yes, this is important, that is important. Because if you just buy it the next shiny toy, which a lot of people do, you end up just throwing your money away at the next shiny toy that drives by. So this way, by putting money down and you're waiting and you're that delayed gratification has you constantly believing, knowing that you made the right decision. So not only does it sort of give you that little bit of restriction, but it also gives you that percentage down. It gets you a bite out of that depreciation curve. So if you're putting that chunk of money down, no longer are you going from $50,000. A $50,000 car with a 20% down is $10,000. So now you're actually only making payments on $40,000 rather than the 50 grand. And what that means is, well, first of all, you're less likely to feel a pinch on depreciation if you are willing to sell that car in a year or two. You're already well into the curve. Not to mention, your readjusted and calibrated interest charges are going to be much lower. And your end term, even if you take the full term, whether it's 4 years making a higher payment or 5 years making a lower payment, it all blends out. You end up paying a lot less in interest charges at the end of the road, at the end of your 5-year or 6-year term, which, by the way, is a mistake because we're going to get to the next point. 4. And 4 is, in fact, the maximum time you should take your loan payment out for that car. Everybody wants that new shiny Escalade, that pickup truck for 90 grand. Everybody wants that shiny new BMW, but they don't want to wait for it. So A, they don't put enough down payment. B, they take it now because they don't earn enough, so now they're having to flatten out their monthly payments. But in doing so, they're going to have to extend the loan term. And that's where these banks and dealers have gotten a lot of people into hot water. They put them into negative equity, heavy depreciation, no down payment, and then, of course, they can't make their payments. You have no equity built into that, and then basically 3 years in and you've got nothing to show for it. That's the worst thing. So the best thing you can do, 20% down, 4 years maximum. If you can actually get your car payments to a place where you can manage it within your monthly budget of 3 years that you can pay that vehicle off, you'll be much less stressed at the end of the road. 4 years, sure, go as high as that, but I wouldn't go any more than 4 years. If you have to go 6 or 7 years, you probably can't afford the vehicle. At that point, I would seriously reconsider that vehicle and maybe look at something lower cost. Possibly, if you have a deposit and you're looking at, hey, I've got that 20%, another frugal approach is maybe scrap this whole idea in the first place. I'll take that 20% of that 50 grand is $10,000. Maybe scrap it all together and say, you know what? I don't need that. I'm going to take my 10 grand that I was going to put on this new car, and I would suffer heavy depreciation and I would be making all these interest charges, but I'll take that 10 grand and buy a slightly older used vehicle. $10,000, I don't own the bank anything. I don't own anything to the dealership. I just drive my car. Yeah, it's not the latest. Sure, it doesn't have the most performance, and maybe it's nothing to brag about at the kitchen table, but you own it and the bank does not. Now let's talk about the third rule on the 24-10 rule. You should never exceed 10% of your monthly gross income on your car consumption costs. Yes, that's not just car payments, which a lot of people go by. So in other words, based on our salary calculations that we spoke of, if you make $40,000 a year, divide that by 12 months, you should never exceed $330 per month. But that's not your car payment. That's also including your insurance as well as any other costs like maintenance. As well, if you're $80,000 a year, you're talking about $670 a month. But again, not in car payments. That's car payments as well as maintenance and insurance. And well, on top, if you're $150,000 a year, you should not exceed $1,250. But again, that's inclusive of your car payment, insurance, maintenance, and none of this is including fuel because fuel is quite variable and that's up and down, and you might park it one day not. So that's somewhat variable, but you should really consider all your all-in costs for your vehicle to be wrapped up within less than 10% of your gross salary income. I used to wonder what that 10% rule meant, and probably a lot of you wondering, why is it 10%? Why not 12 or 15 or 20%? Well, what it is a calculation based on a law of averages. And it does leave you some buffer in there. So other things in life come up, medical expenses, maybe a last minute trip, or you have to fix a roof on your house. And it sure as it accomplishes that goal. That gives you the money, leaves that money set aside, hopefully within your budget, to allow for some of these other unforeseens. So then the big question becomes, do you lease a car? Do you buy it, either cash, take loan payments out on it? Well, let's dive into that. Let's talk about leases first, because leases often don't make a lot of sense financially. However, if in the certain circumstances you're looking and you have a small business and you're able to take advantage of some many tax laws and provide tax write-offs, it may provide some benefits there. As well, you might be a buyer that likes to keep your car for only a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and you like to keep moving, and you just can't stand being an older, worn-out car, and you definitely don't want a car that has no warranty. This could also be an option for you. Lower monthly payments could also be a win in leasing a vehicle as well. It usually also means you have a lower down payment. So there's many benefits in leasing a vehicle. The downside is you have mileage limitations, so you can't exceed a certain amount of miles or kilometers on that vehicle per year. So when you hand it back, and that's the other downfall, is you have to hand it back and you never keep it. It's fiscally irresponsible unless you're utilizing it for those specific reasons to actually lease a vehicle. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's why in most cases, unless you're a business owner or you really can't stand the idea of owning a vehicle outside of warranty period, then I would suggest maybe buying your vehicle. So then we talk about buying a car. Does it make more sense to buy cash, or does it make more sense to take out a loan period? Well, it depends a lot on it, a lot of factors. Again, do you like to be the person that doesn't want that looming car payment hanging over your head? If so, definitely buying a cash is going to do it. If you also have been one of those buyers that happens to be able to save money and delayed gratification, and you have the money at hand and it actually buys you an advantage on the negotiations, go feel free. But we also know that rarely does that get you an advantage, because in most cases, car dealers recognize that they are trying to sell you on the in-house financing. So when they do that, and they know that you're coming in cash, they don't have the ability to make profit on the margin or the rate that they would selling you the car at and tie you up to a lease or a finance payment for the next 5 or 6 or 7 years. So a cash buy usually means there's very little to negotiate, and that's why they rarely are likely to negotiate on a cash deal. They'd much rather tie you up with a finance rate. There are other advantages. If maybe for some example, your truck is finally worn out, it's seen its final best days, and you have this pile of money, $56,000 in the bank, and your vehicle saw its better days and it's time to step up. You know, maybe you're not the big investor. If you're not a strong investor and you haven't had that money tied up somewhere else, it's better on putting in a vehicle, saving yourself interest charges, and putting on that car and be done with it. However, a lot of investors recognize that they would rather make money somewhere with that $56,000 in an investment portfolio somewhere that's drawing income in, and make a small payment on that car if the finance rates are right. So it depends on that balance. If they got good finance rates, 0%, 1%, 2%, and they're making more off their $56K, they might put that money over there and make their monthly payments on the car. So it all depends on interest rates and how fiscally responsible you are as a buyer. And I hope that really gives you a real strong hand, and I hope that really helps you figure out your monthly budget and how to assign it to a car so you don't overspend your income. Now, with that said, right there, That's examples of some of the cheapest cars you can own in a 10-year time frame. You might want to take a look at those if you like your money. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.